Hi folks, I'm Neha. This is Shubham with me. We are the maintainers of Keploy. That's an open source API testing platform to generate test cases out of API calls along with the data mocks. A little bit about ourselves. We have both been leading previously data team at FARI and special projects team at Lenskart. We have been contributing to open source world like projects like 𝐂𝐥𝐨𝐿, Jenkins and why we started Keploy. I'll just give you a brief story that we all have been in this state where we wanted to start something new, make some new project, make new features, deliver those, and we wanted to do all that fast. And as the code grew, the the effort of writing the unit test cases, the API test cases, it became difficult. Maintaining those unit test cases took a lot of bandwidth, and we all ideally want to achieve more than 80% of the test coverage, but the time is limited. Especially when I talk about writing unit test cases or API test cases in terms of microservice environment, then you need to write a whole lot of data mocks. Let's say your service is talking to some internal microservice or third-party vendor service like Twilio, Stripe, some Google or AWS microservice. Then you have to really write a lot of data mocks, dependency on other teams, a lot of bandwidth. So yeah, all that was very frustrating, and we all wanted to shift a bit left, wanted to discover all those bugs as we are developing the application just during that, because as that bug floated towards the right in the software development lifecycle, this is a very popular saying that it costs you exponentially, both in terms of money and time. So yeah, that's why we started Keploy. So how it works is very simple. Whenever you're making an API call to your application, Keploy SDK is just going to record the request, the subsequent network calls from the third-party vendors or DB services or any other external dependencies, and the expected response for that API call. It's going to combine all that and gonna save it as a test case in the Keploy server. Next time, whenever you develop a new version of your application, you just run the application in the test mode. Keploy is going to download the previously captured test cases and run it one by one with your application. And the cool part is that you don't need to set up the dependencies, those external dependencies, like let's say you're using MongoDB, Postgres database, or you're using a messaging service, anything, payment service. All those does not need to be mocked while testing, because Keploy is just going to mock that from previously recorded network interactions for that API call or a test case. And whenever your new version of the application is going to return a response, Keploy is going to match that from the expected response and going to highlight what all impact areas are there, if any. Yeah, so that's how it works in simple terms. A few different features from traditional record replay products is Keploy is able to find the non-deterministic fields, like in your APIs you might have timestamps, random numbers, UUIDs, etc. So Keploy is able to remove those noisy fields and does not highlight that while comparing your expected and actual response. And like we just discussed, we are not only replaying the API traffic but also the external dependencies or the data mocks that you write. And last but not the least, we integrate with the native testing libraries. For example, in Go, we integrate with GoTest. So that will benefit in the case like you don't need to modify your existing CI pipelines if you are already tracking coverage with GoTest, and you don't need to you don't need to remove the existing unit test cases and record it via Keploy. Um, it is written or integrated in such a way that you can use Keploy alongside your existing unit test cases, and it will show the additional coverage with the existing unit test cases. And one other benefit that you get with it is that you can use your existing tooling IDs to see which areas of the code are covered or not. Uh, so Shubham will quickly show you a demo around this, how to quickly capture the API calls into test cases, replay them for testing purpose, and how to track the coverage. Shubham, up to you.
Hi folks, so this is a demo of Keploy. So here we'll be exploring a sample application to show what Keploy does. To get started, you can head over to the Keploy GitHub repository. So there's the main Keploy page. And to install Keploy, currently we provide two options. You could either use the Docker Compose to quickly get started locally, and later you could also use the Kubernetes Helm chart. So for the purpose of this demo, after we've cloned the Keploy repository, we can just simply use the Docker Compose to quickly get started. So let's do that. Yep, once this is done, we should have Keploy started. I can check out the UI on localhost 8081. So as you can see, there are two sections here, test cases and test runs. Currently, test cases and test runs both are empty. Next, let's head over to the sample application. So in this case, it's going to be in Keploy. We currently have a repository for our Go samples, which is samples.go. And since currently we only support the Go SDK, we have a sample repository for that. We also are working on a JavaScript, Java, and Python SDK as well. So if you are interested in those SDKs, feel free to join the community, and we can work together in building a great SDK support for your application. So for getting started with the Go, a Go sample, we'll check out the Echo SQL sample, in which we're using the Echo router and Postgres. And in this example, this is a URL shortener example. So in which there are just two simple endpoints. The first endpoint would shorten a given URL, and then the next endpoint allows you to get back the original URL. So it will redirect to the original URL from the shortened URL. To get started, we already started Keploy. Then we have to clone the URL shortener and start the Postgres instance. So let's do that. So this should start the Postgres instance, and then let's head over to the URL shortener code base. So in the URL shortener code base, it's a pretty short code base, and here we've already integrated Keploy. So you can see here that we have initialized Keploy, and we have to supply the application name, the port at which the application would run locally, and as well as the backend configuration. Now, since we are running locally using Docker Compose, this is the default endpoint. If you don't provide any endpoint, this tries to connect to the Keploy's production endpoint. So keep that in mind. If you want to use the managed service, you could use that, but you would need an API key by signing up to the console, or you could use your own by running Keploy on your own Kubernetes cluster and passing the URL here. So while you initialize Keploy, you also need to wrap your dependencies and your router. So in this case, we're using the Echo router, which is pretty popular. So here we're adding the middleware for that, as well as since we're using Postgres, we have a way to quickly wrap the SQL driver and register Keploy's driver. So here we're wrapping the driver. 𝐾SQL is Keploy SQL package, and here we are registering it. So 2 extra lines. Um, and yeah, this is how we integrated Keploy into this application. So there's just one-time setup during initialization. Every other call will not be required. Yeah, so once this is done, it's time to run a URL shortener to try it out. So let's, using hopscotch, you could use curl as well. So let's try, let's give it github.com instead of google.com. Send, and we have a shortened URL. Now we can take this and just do a get. So as you can see, this source code is essentially GitHub source code. So if I paste it on the browser, it would just go to github.com. So we can see the URL shortener is working. Now time to see what Keploy generated. So now if I head over to test cases, I can see it captured all the 3 calls that I did. I can go into the details. For example, here's a response, the response headers, the request. This was in the body, the request headers. And here's the interesting part. We also get a section for dependency. So what makes Keploy special, compared to other regular record replay products is we also record the infrastructure calls. So this helps with the dependencies. So in this case, as you can see, during these calls, first there was a ping operation, then a query context, and I can see the exact queries which are fired with the arguments, right? And you can also, if you're a power user, there are many things that you may not find in the UI. You can dig deeper using the raw events. So this allows you to go deeper into what Keploy is doing without being limited by the UI itself. So as you can see, this another interesting thing is that it has already figured out that body.ts is noise. So as you can see, in the response, the timestamp field will always be different. So Keploy has already figured out to ensure that in future comparisons, avoid timestamp file comparing, because it will always be different. So yeah, that's how we figure out noisy or non-deterministic fields. Now as you can see, test runs are still empty, so we'll have to perform some tests. So now that test cases are recorded, I can head over here and we have a native integration with Go test. So all you need to do is just add these 3 lines and that's it. So let's try to run that. So I'm using IntelliJ, so you can quickly run this with coverage. So before that, let me stop Keploy. The URL shortener demo. And yeah, the interesting thing here, we mock the dependencies call. So remember the Postgres that we were running? We can actually stop this. We don't need this running anymore during testing. So let's stop it, and let's run these tests. So as you can see, there's a configurable cold start period of 5 seconds, and as you can see, it is downloaded and run 3 test cases. All of them are passed, and we're also getting a coverage because it integrates with GoTest. You can also see GoTest allows you to see test coverage, and in this case, you're able to see the test coverage in the IDE itself. So for example, if I go into main.go, I can see what lines are covered, what is not. You can see the red and yellow and green lines showing you which lines are covered, which are the conditional statements, and which are not covered. Same here, like you can individually go and see. This will help you. For example, this line is not covered. You can add a condition, or you can you can create an API request which will cover this, right? So this helps you get deeper insights into your test cases, similar to what you would do by writing a unit test, right? So here I didn't have to write anything. I just recorded what I was, what I would do as a developer, and I have already got 76% coverage. It's a simple code base, but I think this gives you an idea of how you could quickly unit test your APIs, and predictably run those test suites without needing to write mocks or test data or explicit unit tests. To go further, what we can also do is we could try changing behavior of the application. So in this case, or in fact, before that, let's quickly see if I want to deep dive into what's going on. Now, if I go to my test runs, you can see there is a test run which I just ran, and you can see there are two endpoints, and it's showing me like this was just a redirect, so there's nothing here. But in this case, I can see that what the expected actual response is, and like I said, timestamp is already identified as a noisy field. So as you can see, these are different. The timestamps are different, and Keploy did not fail the test case. It was like it's fine. Now let's try to fail a test case. I think that will be more interesting. So to do that, we can maybe change the key that we're returning. So for example, from something like URLs to URLs. That should simply allow us to see a change. So let's try to rerun the test cases again. Cool. So we can see that one of the test cases has failed and the overall overall test suite has failed. So let's check that out on the UI. Yeah. So as you can see now, there is one failed test. If I open it up, I can quickly see that Keploy has identified that this has been removed and this has been added. So it has spotted that there's a change. Now this could either be a regression that is added by you, or this could be an expected change. And again, I'll talk about dependency mocking once again, that it has you're not running the Postgres anymore. So the whole application thinks that it's talking to Postgres, but it's actually getting all the data from Keploy using the SDK. So that's a great part. You don't need any infrastructure anymore while running your test case. And if I want to consider this as my new default, all I need to do is I can normalize it very easily. I can go here and accept this as normal behavior. So what this is going to do is that it's going to update my test case to use the newer responses. So again, I didn't have to write anything, and I've updated my newer behavior. In fact, now if I go to my test cases, if I refresh, I can go in here and I can see it say URLs. And let's try running tests as well once again. So if I run the tests here once again, you can see all tests are passing, because I can see that in the UI as well, that it's now expecting the field to be URLs. So we've kind of, as we're developing, we've normalized the behavior based on what we expect from the application. Yeah, so I hope this gives you some understanding about Keploy using a sample application. You can all try this by going over to the sample repository for Go, which is available. And one fun fact which I would like to also talk about is how we're also testing Keploy using Keploy. So for example, the 74% coverage you're seeing here, we have not written any unit test. It's all using Keploy. And in fact, since we were using Go test, we were able to reuse existing tooling. Like for example, in this case for test coverage, we are using coveralls. You could be using any other test case coverage product, any other CI product. So in this case, we are using GitHub Actions. So you can also go here and look at the workflow, and this is the test step. And in this particular place, like this is the standard way of testing a Go program. There's nothing special related to Keploy. The only thing that we have done is added few environment variables. This one is for the API key, which is in this case the API key for the open source project. It's a public API key. And also we've added a flag for deduplication. That's it. If you're using your own hosted version of Keploy, even these will not be required, and you can simply use whatever Go test pipeline you already had. And another interesting thing that you can also do is, let's say you already have existing unit tests already written, right? Maybe your coverage is maybe 50% already. So Keploy's test would run alongside it, and whatever it's adding, it will add up to your overall coverage. For example, let's say you have 50% already written and additional 20% is covered by Keploy. Go test would start reporting 70% coverage. So that's another great way to integrate Keploy into your workflow. Yeah, I think this gives you an understanding better about how you can integrate Keploy into your workflows, into your CI pipelines, and leverage it for saving time in managing your test data, writing test data, writing mocks, which can be super painful, especially if you have a lot of internal or external microservices, and also writing the tests themselves. So I hope that gives you an insight on how you can be more productive there. And yeah, that's it for the demo. Thanks.